My name's Claire. I'm 29 now, living in a quiet Pennsylvania suburb with a view of endless maple trees and a driveway that always feels too empty. People say I'm lucky. A good job, my own house, the kind of stability everyone in my family used to dream about. But luck isn't the word I'd use. Luck is when something falls into your lap. My life was built out of long nights, cheap takeout, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. Growing up, I learned early that nothing was free. Not affection, not approval, and definitely not love. My parents, Linda and Peter, were the kind of people who kept score like it was their religion. Every ride, every dinner, every favor was a debt waiting to be repaid, and somehow I was always the one who owed. I don't remember a time when I wasn't trying to earn their respect. Even as a kid, I knew my brother Adam had it easier. He was 3 years younger, golden-haired, charming in that lazy, effortless way that made people forgive him before he even apologized. He could do no wrong. And me? I was the one who needed to set an example. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was loud and public and humiliating in the way only family can make it. Adam got the soccer camps, the designer sneakers, the new iPhone the week it came out. I got secondhand everything. Because you're responsible, Claire, and you don't care about appearances. At 15, I started babysitting to buy my own clothes because I was tired of wearing whatever my mom's coworker's daughter outgrew. By 17, I was working after school at a diner, saving for community college while Adam got a brand new gaming console for stress relief. My mom used to say, "You're so independent, Claire. You don't need us to hold your hand like your brother does." But independence wasn't something I asked for. It was something I was cornered into. It's strange how parents can raise two kids in the same house and live entirely different lives. Adam grew up in a world of safety nets. I grew up learning how to fall and not scream when it hurt. I remember the day I got my first acceptance letter. Not to some fancy school, just a decent state college. My mom looked at it, smiled thinly, and said, "That's nice, honey. But how will you pay for it?" No offer of help, just a challenge, as if to say, "Prove you deserve it." I worked through college, full-time classes, 2 part-time jobs, no safety net, no vacations. My parents would visit occasionally, mostly to brag about Adam's potential. He'd dropped out of college after a semester, but somehow, in their version of reality, that was noble. He just hasn't found himself yet. Meanwhile, when I got promoted at my on-campus job, my dad said, "Don't get cocky, Claire. Success can disappear faster than you think." Every time I tried to share something good, they found a way to twist it into guilt. When I graduated, I didn't expect balloons or a party. I just wanted them to say they were proud. Instead, my mom said, "Well, we didn't have to help you at all. That's something, right?" I should have known then that I'd never be enough for them. But I kept trying, because that's what daughters do. We keep trying to earn love that was never unconditional to begin with. When I landed my first real job in tech at 24, I called my mom immediately. She congratulated me, then asked if Adam could crash with me for a few months, just until he figures things out. I said no, politely, but firmly. She hung up on me. By 28, I'd done what no one in my family thought I could. I bought a house. It wasn't huge, 2 bedrooms, small yard, creaky floors that sang in the winter, but it was mine. Every dollar of that down payment came from years of discipline, side hustles, and saying no when everyone else said yes. Signing those papers felt like breathing for the first time. I wanted to share that feeling with my family, stupidly believing that maybe now they'd see me not as a wallet or a workhorse, but as a person. So I invited them over for dinner, made lasagna from scratch, even bought a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce. When they walked in, I could tell instantly it wasn't going to be the warm celebration I imagined. My mom's eyes darted around the house like she was appraising it, her lips pressed tight. My dad joked, "Wow, Claire, who'd you rob for this place?" And Adam whistled low, saying, "Man, it must be nice to have all this. Some of us are still struggling." I laughed awkwardly, trying to keep the peace. But every word they spoke chipped at the excitement I'd been holding on to. My mom finally said, "It's nice, Claire, but don't you think it's a bit much for someone your age?" That line echoed in my head for days. Dinner was worse. I'd spent hours cooking, but no one seemed hungry. The conversation turned, like it always did, toward Adam's plans. He was thinking of going back to college, maybe this time finishing his degree in business. I smiled, said that was great, and poured more wine. Then my mom cleared her throat and said, "We were talking earlier. Maybe you could help him get started again. Tuition's expensive, and you've done so well for yourself." I froze. "Help him how?" I asked, even though I already knew. My dad said, "Well, you don't have a family to support. You've got a good salary, your mortgage isn't huge. It's only fair to give back a little." My fork clinked against the plate. "Give back?" I repeated. "You mean pay for Adam?" My mom frowned like I was being unreasonable. "He's your brother, Claire. Family helps family." That was the moment it hit me. The house, the job, the independence, none of it changed anything. In their eyes, my success wasn't mine. It was theirs to redistribute. My dad leaned back in his chair, sighing. "Don't be selfish, Claire. We didn't raise you to turn your back on your brother." I stood up, said dinner was over, and cleared the plates while they stared. The silence felt heavier than any argument. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the empty wine glasses. The house that felt like freedom a few hours ago now felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by the weight of expectation. My mom texted later that night, "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll regret it if you let money come between family." I didn't reply. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to fix things. I just let her message sit there, unread, unanswered. The next morning, when I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I didn't see the dutiful daughter they'd spent years molding. I saw someone tired. Tired of apologizing for being independent, tired of carrying the guilt they used to control me. I didn't know then that their resentment was only beginning, that my refusal to pay for Adam's dreams would spiral into something darker, something that would nearly destroy me. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. That house, flawed as it was the first thing I'd ever owned that couldn't be taken from me. Or at least, that's what I thought. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. 3 weeks had passed since that dinner, the one that split something open between me and my family. My mother's number lit up on my phone one Thursday morning while I was halfway through a presentation at work. I silenced it. Then she called again and again. By the third time, I excused myself and answered, already bracing for guilt. But her voice wasn't the usual sharp-edged scolding. It was trembling. "Claire, it's Adam," she said. "He's been in an accident." My stomach dropped. I don't remember hanging up or driving, just a blur of traffic lights and rain-slicked streets. When I reached the hospital, Adam was sitting up in bed with a bandaged arm and a sheepish grin. My parents were hovering over him like he'd just returned from war. "He's fine," the nurse said. "Just a mild concussion and a fractured wrist." Relief flooded through me, until my mom turned to me and said, "You see, he can't work like this. He needs help more than ever." And there it was again, the familiar hook buried in concern. For the next few weeks, Adam stayed at my parents' place, milking his injury for sympathy. My mom called daily, not to check on me, but to talk about him. "He's been so depressed, Claire. You know he looks up to you. Maybe if you helped him, it would lift his spirits." It was always if you helped him, never if we helped him. One afternoon, Adam called me himself. His voice was light, casual. "Hey sis, heard you got a raise. Congrats." Listen, I found this certification program, short, online, could help me get a job. Thought maybe you could loan me the money. I hesitated, then said no, gently but firmly. His tone shifted instantly. You're unbelievable, he snapped. I'm your brother. What's the point of all your money if you can't even help family? I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That night, my mom left a voicemail, her words dripping with disappointment. I don't know what's happened to you, Claire. You've become cold. We didn't raise you like this. I deleted it, but their voices lingered, echoing in the corners of my mind. I told myself they'd calm down eventually. I didn't know they were already planning something worse. 2 months later, a man in a gray suit showed up at my door. Miss Claire Morrison? He asked. When I nodded, he handed me an envelope. You've been served. I stared at him, confused. Excuse me? But he was already walking away. Inside the envelope was a stack of papers, legal documents. The words blurred as I read them, but one phrase stood out. Claim for financial compensation and property dispute. My parents and brother were suing me for misappropriation of family funds and emotional distress. I laughed out loud at first, a broken, disbelieving sound. They claimed the money I used to buy my house partly belonged to them, that I'd used family savings meant for Adam's education, which was absurd. Every cent I earned was mine, documented, taxed, and clean. But when I called my mom, her tone was eerily calm. It's not personal, Claire, she said. We just want what's fair. I could barely breathe. Fair? I whispered. You're dragging me to court? She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. You left us no choice. You've been selfish for too long. Then she hung up, leaving me staring into the silence that had followed me all my life. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers, sleepless nights, and panic attacks I didn't have names for. My manager at work noticed. You okay, Claire? You seem off. I wasn't okay. I was unraveling. Every time I opened my inbox, I half expected another legal notice. Their lawyer claimed my parents had loaned me $20,000 years ago, money they said I'd promised to return. It was fiction, twisted from a single truth. Once, when I was 21, my dad had given me a few $100s for textbooks. I thanked him, and he'd said, "You'll pay me back someday when you're rich." I thought it was a joke. Now they were turning it into evidence. My attorney, a kind woman named Marcy, looked at me across the table. They don't have a case that will hold up, but it's gonna get ugly. She was right. My parents started telling relatives that I'd stolen from them. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, asking if it was true. I stopped answering my phone altogether. I started working late just to avoid going home. The house that once felt like freedom now felt like a bunker. The first court date was surreal. My parents sat across from me, Adam beside them in a sling he didn't even need anymore. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father gave me a stiff nod as if we were business rivals instead of family. When the judge asked if we'd considered mediation, my mom said sweetly, "We tried, Your Honor, but Claire refused to compromise." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout every truth they'd buried, the years of neglect, the favoritism, the emotional manipulation. But I just sat there, my hands trembling. The hearing dragged on for hours. My attorney presented bank statements, pay stubs, every bit of proof showing the money was mine. The opposing lawyer, some smug family friend, painted me as a greedy daughter who turned her back on her struggling family. At one point, Adam actually cried on the stand, talking about how abandoned he felt. My mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. It was theater, and I was the villain. When it was over, the judge postponed the decision, saying more documentation was needed. As we left the courtroom, my mom brushed past me and whispered, "You could have ended this quietly. You chose war." That night, I sat on my porch wrapped in a blanket, listening to the hum of distant traffic. My chest felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out. How do you mourn people who are still alive? I thought about every birthday I'd spent trying to make them proud, every report card I framed, every phone call where I'd swallowed my hurt. And for what? To be sued by the same people whose approval I spent my life chasing? Marcy called the next morning with cautious optimism. They don't have evidence, Claire. The case will probably be dismissed. But even if it was, what did I win? My family's love had turned into paperwork, my childhood rewritten into accusations. The court date came and went. The judge ruled in my favor. Case dismissed. But victory didn't feel like victory. It felt like ashes. My parents didn't call. Adam didn't apologize. They just disappeared, leaving behind an empty silence I couldn't decide was peace or grief. Some nights, I still check my phone, half expecting my mom to text something simple. Let's talk. But she never does. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the lesson isn't that blood is thicker than water. Maybe it's that, sometimes, blood is just another word for debt. After the lawsuit ended, silence became my daily soundtrack. No calls, no texts, no messages from anyone who shared my last name. You'd think it would feel freeing, like a toxic noise finally turned off, but the quiet felt heavier than the shouting ever did. I stopped checking the mailbox because every envelope looked like bad news. The neighbors still waved when I watered the lawn, but I rarely waved back. Something in me had calcified, a mixture of anger, sadness, and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't go away with sleep. Work was my only refuge. I'd show up early, stay late, nod through meetings, and pretend productivity could drown grief. But grief has a way of slipping through cracks. It found me on random afternoons, in the smell of lasagna at the cafe downstairs, in the way a mother brushed crumbs off her son's shirt at lunch. Every reminder was a needle. I told myself I was fine, that I'd moved on. But even the walls of my house seemed to remember. They creaked differently at night, like the house itself knew I'd built it on loneliness. The first storm warning came in late September. Historic rainfall expected, the news anchor said, her voice too cheerful for the forecast she was reading. People rushed to stockpile on bottled water and candles, but I barely noticed. Storms didn't scare me. I'd survived worse ones, the emotional kind. That Friday evening, though, as the wind began to howl, I felt something uneasy settle inside me. I closed all the windows, drew the curtains, and lit a candle just in case the power went out. The rain started slow, then came harder, hammering the roof like fists demanding entry. Thunder rolled, long and low, vibrating through the floorboards. I sat on the couch with my laptop, pretending to read emails, but my mind wandered. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe. A voicemail. I pressed play. Claire, it's Dad. Your mother's not well. Call us. Just 6 words, but they hit harder than any thunder outside. I stared at the phone, frozen. Part of me wanted to delete the message. The other part, the daughter still somewhere inside, dialed back. It was Adam who answered. His voice was cold, cautious. Claire, I heard from Dad that Mom's sick. What happened? A pause. Then, she had a mild stroke. She's in the hospital. For a second, all the bitterness drained out of me. Is she going to be okay? She's stable? Then softer, almost resentful. She keeps asking for you. The words tangled in my throat. After everything, the lawsuit, the lies, she wanted me? I'll come, I said, before my pride could stop me. The drive to their town was nearly impossible. The storm had swallowed the roads. Trees leaned like dying giants. Lightning split the sky into jagged shards. My wipers couldn't keep up. Halfway there, the radio cut out, replaced by the steady hiss of static. I almost turned back, but guilt pushed me forward. By the time I reached the hospital parking lot, water sloshed over my shoes. The fluorescent lights inside felt foreign, too bright for the storm raging outside. When I found her room, my mother looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile, her face pale, hair threaded with more gray than before. My father sat in the corner, eyes red but dry. "Claire," she whispered when she saw me. I froze at the sound of my name, not the way she used to say it, clipped and disappointed, but soft, almost human. I stepped closer. "Hi, Mom." She reached for my hand, fingers trembling. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words I'd waited my whole life to hear, and suddenly I didn't know what to do with them. I wanted to believe her, to let them melt the years of distance between us, but trust doesn't grow back overnight. "Why now?" I asked. Her eyes filled. "Because I was wrong. About so many things. About you." My father turned his head away, pretending to study the rain hitting the window. I could tell he didn't share her regret. I sat there anyway, holding her hand while machines beeped steadily around us. She talked. Not much, just fragments of apologies stitched with exhaustion. "I let money ruin us," she said. "I thought helping Adam meant keeping the family together. I didn't see what I was losing." Tears blurred my vision. "You lost me," I whispered. She nodded weakly. "I know." The storm outside worsened, wind screaming through the hospital vents. At some point, the lights flickered and went out, replaced by the faint hum of backup generators. Nurses moved quickly, flashlights slicing through the dark. My dad muttered something about the power lines, but I barely heard him. My mom squeezed my hand again, whispering, "Stay tonight." Against every instinct, I said yes. I sat by her bed until she fell asleep, watching her chest rise and fall in the dim light. Memories came uninvited, her scolding me for muddy shoes, her laughter that one summer she actually smiled, the sound of her humming while cooking. Somewhere between those memories, I realized how much of my identity had been built around her approval, and how empty I'd feel if she never woke up again. Around 3 a.m., the storm reached its peak. The hospital windows rattled like gunfire. I stepped into the hallway to stretch and saw Adam leaning against the wall. For a long time, we said nothing. Then he sighed. "She really wanted to see you." "I know." "She kept saying you were the only one who never needed her." Guess she was proud of that in her own weird way. We stood there, 2 broken siblings who'd learned to love through rivalry. Finally, I asked, "Why did you go along with the lawsuit, Adam?" He looked down. "I don't know. I was angry. They told me you'd shut them out. I believed them. Maybe I wanted to believe it." Outside, lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, his face looked just like the boy I used to protect from bullies. I said, "It's over now." "Yeah," he murmured. "I'll drop by sometime, if that's okay." I nodded. When morning came, the storm had passed. The world outside was drenched, trees uprooted, roads flooded. But the air felt cleaner somehow. My mother slept peacefully, color slowly returning to her face. Before leaving, I kissed her forehead. "Get better," I whispered. Driving home, sunlight broke through the clouds, washing everything in gold. For the first time in months, I felt a fragile kind of peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. Maybe storms don't destroy. Maybe they reveal what was weak all along and leave behind what's meant to stay. As I pulled into my driveway, the house didn't look haunted anymore. It looked like shelter. Mine. Still. Always. The morning after the storm, the world felt washed clean. The trees dripped sunlight, and the air smelled of wet earth and electricity. I slept for the first time in weeks, dreamless and heavy, the kind of sleep that feels like a small mercy. When I woke, I brewed coffee, sat by the kitchen window, and listened to the silence. Not the anxious kind that had filled the house before, but something softer, almost forgiving. My phone buzzed mid-morning. It was Adam. "She's awake," he said. "Mom's asking for you again." I hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded to no one. "I'll come." This time the drive felt different. The roads were still slick, branches scattered like old scars, but the world looked alive again. When I walked into my mother's hospital room, she smiled faintly. "You came back," she whispered. "Of course I did." She reached for my hand, and for a moment the years between us disappeared. The arguments, the distance, the coldness. What remained was just a mother and daughter, fragile and human. "There's something I want you to have," she said. "It's in my nightstand drawer at home. A letter. You'll understand when you read it." 2 days later, she passed away in her sleep. Peacefully, the doctor said. I sat by her bed long after they'd taken away the machines, holding the hand that once taught me how to hold a pencil, how to tie a ribbon, how to reach for the world without trembling. My father stood by the window, staring out at the rain that had started again, softer this time. Adam cried quietly beside me, his hand on my shoulder. There were no grand speeches, no cinematic reconciliations, just silence, the kind that swallows you whole. The funeral came quickly, a blur of faces, flowers, and the smell of wet grass. My mother looked calm, almost peaceful, in her light blue dress, the same one she'd worn to my college graduation, the day she barely smiled. After the service, people hugged me, said things like, "She was proud of you. You look so much like her. She's in a better place." I nodded, smiled politely, and said thank you. But inside, I felt like a hollow shell carrying too many ghosts. That night, back at my house, I sat on the edge of my bed with the letter she'd mentioned in my hand. The envelope was pale yellow, my name written in her familiar cursive. For a long time, I just stared at it. My mother's handwriting had always been neat, precise, the kind of handwriting that didn't allow mistakes. Seeing it now made my throat tighten. I finally opened the envelope and unfolded the paper, soft and worn like she'd handled it many times before deciding to give it to me. "My dearest Claire," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say what I needed to while I was still here." I took a deep breath and kept reading. She wrote about her childhood, about how her own parents had been cold and distant, how love in her family was always a transaction, respect earned through obedience, affection given through achievement. "I wanted to do better," she wrote, "but I didn't know how. I repeated what I knew, thinking it was love." My eyes blurred as I read on. She admitted that Adam's birth was complicated, that he'd nearly died, and she'd promised herself she'd protect him at any cost. "That promise became my curse," she wrote. "I overprotected him, and in doing so, I neglected you. You were strong, and I mistook your strength for not needing me. I was wrong." She confessed that the lawsuit wasn't her idea. It had started with my father and Adam. She'd tried to stop it, but by the time she realized how far it had gone, pride and fear kept her silent. She told herself, "You'd be fine. You always were." But every night, I dreamed of the look on your face that day in court. I've never forgiven myself for it. The next lines broke me. "When you stopped calling, I understood what real loss felt like. You taught me something I never taught you. Boundaries are not betrayal. Loving yourself isn't selfish. I see that now. Too late. I read those words over and over until the paper blurred with tears. For the first time, I saw her not as a villain in my story, but as a woman trapped in her own patterns, shaped by pain, trying and failing to do better. She ended the letter with one final request. Don't let my mistakes become your inheritance. Let them end with me. Build something new, something softer. And no, even if I never said it right, I was always proud of you. I folded the letter and pressed it against my chest, letting the tears fall freely. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Not a storm this time, just a gentle breeze, as if the world itself was exhaling. I thought about how grief and love often live in the same place, tangled and inseparable. For years, I'd carried resentment like armor, thinking it protected me from hurt. But reading her words, I realized it had only kept me from healing. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' house one last time. It looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the porch steps creaking under my weight. My father was in the living room, surrounded by unopened condolence cards. He looked up, eyes tired. "You got the letter?" he asked. I nodded. "She wanted you to have that." He hesitated, then said, "She talked about you every day, you know? Even when she was angry. She never stopped loving you." His voice cracked, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. Without thinking, I reached out and hugged him. The years between us collapsed in that moment. Two flawed people learning how to start over. When I got home that night, I placed my mother's letter in a wooden box on my nightstand, next to old photographs, childhood drawings, and a single seashell I'd once found with Adam on a family trip to the shore. I lit a candle and whispered, "I forgive you." The house felt warm again, alive in a way it hadn't been since before the lawsuit. I walked to the porch and watched the sky turn gold with the setting sun. Adam texted me later that evening. Just 3 words. "Thank you, Claire." I smiled. Some wounds don't heal in days or weeks. They just stop bleeding long enough for new skin to grow. As the light faded, I realized something simple but profound. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that pain tried to take. My mother's last lesson wasn't written in anger or regret. It was written in love, hidden behind all her human mistakes. And as I sat there, breathing in the calm after everything, I finally understood what she meant when she said to build something softer. The storm had passed. What remained was peace. Quiet, imperfect, but mine.